Hi, I'm Joshua Kemble, and this is my live stream, and we're live, which I'm really excited about. I am going to be working on some comics today. I'm on sort of like a mental health leave from work for a little bit. And so actually this is sort of my easiest way to kind of ease back into kind of working on creative projects is doing my comics. It's one of the things. I kind of got into that in detail on previous live streams, so I'll sort of spare you guys getting too heavy into that topic right now today. But for now, what I'm going to be doing is working on coloring my comic, Not Death But Love, the strange supernatural story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, which is a graphic novel that I'm doing with my sister for West Margin Publishing. And so, if you guys are curious about me or like the comics that I make, I have two graphic novels out right now, two stories, as well as um, Jacob's Apartment, and both of those comic books are available at in the show comments below. There's links that can take you to where you can purchase those. And if you want to support what I do, I really encourage you to pick up those two books. And this will be my third graphic novel. It might end up being my fourth because there's going to be like about a year between when I turn it in and when it's released. And so who knows? But for now, we're going to work on this. And what I've been doing is let's get to my page. There it is. So I am working on coloring page. Let's see what page we're on. Page 36, which is pretty exciting. So page 36 is what I'm working on, and I'm going to go ahead and use like pull open the page 35 as well so I can reference the colors for that. And then I was thinking today I might actually maybe even just talk a little bit about some of my sordid work history. I've worked some really weird jobs prior to working creative, and I thought it might be kind of fun to talk about some of the odd jobs that I've worked. One in particular, I think that I'd like to get into is when I worked at an AM/PM, which for those of you who aren't in the US, that's pretty much BP. It's the same company, but when British Petroleum tried to change the name of AM/PM in California, at least, a bunch of people just stopped shopping there when they were used to like Arco or whatever. They were like, "Oh my gosh, I'm not buying British Petroleum." So they kept the name AM/PM. But anyhow, that's probably what I'm going to be talking about a little bit is what it was like when I was younger. Like this is when I was like, in my late teens, early 20s, working graveyard shifts at an AM/PM, and it might get into some things that hopefully maybe when I start seeing more therapy and stuff like that. I know I'm booked to have a therapist. Some of this stuff might be stuff I might go over with the therapist because while I did work graveyard shifts at an AM/PM, there was a point where I was actually like robbed at gunpoint, which is kind of insane. But it's probably my worst job ever. And it's probably one of the reasons I actually am so dedicated to making comics nowadays. And I think I might have talked about this a little bit on stream before, but I think it's worth revisiting. So we'll get into that. While I'm talking about my worst job ever, I worked a lot of weird jobs like while I was working on comics and stuff like that. I would love to hear your guys' experiences. So let me know in the chats what your worst job ever was. And maybe just a little anecdote about your job. Okay. So I kind of buried the lead by saying what exactly I would be saying or talking about with the job. But I mainly was thinking of that because I do want to kind of make these streams entertaining, and I hope it'll be an entertaining story. So when I was like a really young guy, and let's see, we're gonna color this page too. So I'm gonna be like kind of working, kind of not. Well, I mean, I'll talk about stuff that's not work, but what I'm working on right now is coloring these pages, and I will be bouncing back and forth from talking about what I'm exactly doing. Like right now, we're deselecting the white on this page, and then we'll talk about AM PM stories. So when I was a pretty young guy, I think, I think I might have been like 19 at the time. I was still living at home, and I was attending AV college, which was like a small, it was a junior college, and for people who aren't really super wealthy, who want to do college, junior college was kind of like the best option. And the goal in going to junior college, at least at first, was, hey, like I'll go here, I'll kind of get my general ed done, and then I'll end up transferring. And I think at that time I had already figured out that I wanted to go to um that I really wanted to go to Antelope Valley, not Antelope Valley College. That I wanted to transfer to Long Beach, Cal State Long Beach, which is where I ended up going eventually. But at this point in time, I was like 19. I was living under the roof of my family, and I wasn't too happy with like the rules of where I was living, which is something that happens to a lot of young men when they live under their parents' kind of rule in a weird way. So I was never really a good rule following kind of guy, and so hold on a second. So, did I pick the right color here? That should be the right color. Hold on a second. Oh man, I think I might have picked the wrong color for the bow tie. I think I did. All right, we're gonna have to undo that bow tie choice. All right. So anyhow, I wasn't ever really a rule following type of guy, and so like being like a 19-year-old kid, I wanted to kind of do things on my own, do things under my own kind of discretion. And at the time, I didn't really consider myself a Christian anymore, and so I didn't really see any value in like some of the kind of Christian values that like my family raised me under. And so, like a lot of kids, I kind of rebelled and then ended up actually getting kicked out of the house. And honestly, in retrospect, it just kind of made sense to get kicked out. It was probably the best decision that my parents ever made, was to kick me out of the house when I wasn't appreciating like what they were providing for me. So when I got kicked out of the house, I had a job at like an AM PM, and some of this I'm going to be talking about in Two Stories Book Two, um, just briefly mentioning it. But I had this really terrible job at an AM PM, basically working graveyard shifts. And so graveyard shifts were like shifts that usually started at about midnight, and you would work from midnight till like 8 in the morning. Sometimes they'd start at like 11 and you'd get off at like 7 in the morning. And when I started, this was like before September 11th, and things changed after that for gas station employees. But prior to September 11th, the September 11th we all remember. Um, Before that incident, like people basically would work alone graveyard shifts, and so I would be working, watching a little mini mart and gas station like completely by myself. That means when you had to like take out the trash, you'd have to like lock up the door and basically like walk around to this really weird back alley and like take out the trash. There were all sorts of like horrible things, and keep in mind they seemed extra horrible. Nowadays, it actually doesn't strike me as like it having had been like such a terrible job. But you get all sorts of crazy customers, like, when working there. Like, so because I was working graveyards, we'd have like gang members, like alcoholics, prostitutes, like just basically some of the seediest, you know, people would come by, to buy like booze from the store. And anyhow, so I kind of liked the job though. I mean, it was weird, but it's like at the time I was also pursuing music and I was in a band that was getting kind of courted by like a fairly well-known producer who was recording us in exchange for like when we got signed. They basically said like, "Hey, you can pay us when you get signed." And I was in this band. We had a pretty decent following locally. It was the first band that I had been in where like we played a show and everybody knew our lyrics, even though we had nothing out. They had just memorized all the lyrics. And then I would just work, like I would play these shows and I would work this terrible job, and then I would go home and like I had, roommates. I moved in with some friends that from high school, and then basically just kind of took things um somewhat easy. Hold on a second. Okay. So anyhow, like I had this weird job. A lot of weird customers would come by. It was pretty unique. It was an interesting job. It was insane. You met people a lot. I've always enjoyed meeting random people and getting in interesting conversations with people that I didn't know. So it kind of served me okay. But meanwhile, while all this was happening, I was also like not doing too great at college. How's it going, Frank? Frank Salazar's in the chat. How you doing, buddy? So I wasn't doing too great in college at the time. I was not taking my studies very seriously. And I was just kind of set on like, hey, I'm just gonna like play music and work at this place. And that's it. Um, Now we used to have weird stuff happen all the time there. Like there was a neo-Nazi who used to come in the store with his shirt off, and he had like a giant like American History X type swastika tattoo on his chest. And I would just have to tell him like, "Hey buddy, you got to put on a shirt before you come in here. Like that's not appropriate." Not that I would call the guy buddy, but I just basically have to say, like, dude, you can't, walk around a store with that, you know, emblazoned on your chest. And we had like a lot of unsavory folks that would just stop by and buy like a thing of like malt liquor, like Schlitz or like Bullet. And I used to have to like stock the refrigerator. So I would have to pay attention when the store was slow so I could go back behind the stocking shelves are like behind what you like when you go to a grocery store or a store that has like shelves that are refrigerated. Usually there's a door that you can go behind, and you go behind the shelves and you stock everything. And my main responsibilities at that job were like stock everything, and then from there, like, you know um let's see here, to make sure everything was stocked, to clean the pumps, the gasoline pumps, and like armor all of them. Um, and then, last but not least, obviously like ring up customers and do your cash drops every hour. So they had like a safe that you would drop, every once in a while when your register was getting a little more full. You'd document and then do a cash drop into a safe that you didn't have access to. That was like for safety. And then we had to like clean the bathrooms, which was pretty brutal. Um, quite often when I was cleaning the bathroom, we'd come across like hazardous waste, like heroin needles that had been used in the bathroom. It was just a really weird job. Okay. So I'm trying to kind of paint a picture of what it was like working there. But, again, like I was a young man and I was thinking, hey, this is all kind of okay. At some point, I'm going to get through with college, or my band's going to get signed or something like that. But I wasn't taking my college studies seriously. I was kind of set and okay with like working at AM PM until I got robbed at gunpoint. And when I got robbed at gunpoint, I was just working late at night. That's a good point. No shoes, no shirts, no swastikas, no service. Or swastikas and no service. Yeah, agreed. That was definitely my policy there. Jim said, "You had me at heroin needles." Thank you. Yeah, it was a weird job. And I could probably write like an entire comic, and maybe one day will, about working there. Like, I befriended a lot of the employees there. A lot of them were much older than me, and this was like their career. And they were like some of the sweetest people in the world to me. A lot of the people I worked with, and they always were kind of my biggest cheerleaders. So, but anyhow, so one night when I was working, these graveyard shifts, and you're literally alone with like a whole, there's no like, the 24-hour gas stations that have that like glass thing, and like you can't enter the store and you just go up to, we didn't have that. So the store was literally open 24 hours, and people could walk in and out of the store, from like throughout the entire day. And at 2 o'clock, I used to have to like lock all the beer, like basically like you had to lock the refrigerator doors by the beer. So, people wouldn't do it. And people used to do beer runs all the time. Like, you'd have some kid come in and they'd grab beer and just run out. And the first few times I used to chase them, even though our policy was to not, just because you get this weird thing when you're working at a store. There's this weird thing that just kicks in. It's like a survival instinct, where you want to fight people who stole stuff from the store, even though it's not your property. And, that AMPM is going to just recoup the cost, with their insurance or whatever. It is really hard when you work retail to like not get mad and chase somebody who's stealing stuff. And luckily I never got in any big trouble for that. Never got beat up for that, which I could have. So yeah. So anyhow, I'm working at this job. I've kind of worked there for about a year and a half, and I'm not taking my studies too seriously at school. And one day I'm counting cigarettes, which is another thing you have to do when you work at a gas station. You have to do a count of all of the cigarettes. So when you see like a big cigarette rack, just understand that like if you ever see somebody who's working a register who's like going through the cigarettes, realize they're doing a cigarette count, and they have to tally it up to make sure that no cigarettes got stolen, and to see like what you need to have reordered. And you have to do that like frequently when you work at or at least you used to have to do that like very frequently when you work at these places. But anyhow, I'm doing my cigarette tally, and a guy comes in and he's talking about his wife, like being kind of a pain in the butt and making him go out to get cereal. And so I kind of laugh and make a joke too about it, and we're kind of chuckling. And then suddenly, right when he rings up the cereal, he's going to pay in cash. The second the register opened up, he pulled out a gun and pointed it to my forehead, like right here. And it was like a 9mm. And it was very much a real gun. And he pointed it to where it was like touching my forehead, and basically said, give me all your money or I'm going to kill you. And okay, so there's a little button at the bottom under the shelf. Like there's basically a tabletop that you're kind of working off of. And right under the tabletop, there's like a little red button that would automatically call police. And I had used that in the past, under less dire of circumstances. for whenever we got like robbed or like got stuff stolen, or somebody was like, shoplifting. There's all sorts of reasons you end up calling, um, the police. But in this instance, I just clicked the button because I could do it without him knowing I clicked the button, while I had a gun pointed at my head. And I gave him all the money, which was protocol. You can't actually give them the money that's in the safe. He asked me to open the safe, and I told him they don't give us access to the safe. I can't give you that. But he did end up getting the money, moving the gun away from me, but still pointing it at me, away from my forehead, and then he went through and grabbed a stash of the cigarettes too. He kind of hopped the counter, grabbed a bunch of cigarettes, and then ran out and left with the whole money from the register and the cigarettes. And the one thing that ran through my mind when that gun touched my temple, well, not temple, but my forehead right here, was I could have died working at an AM PM, and that would be what I had done with my life. And that really bothered me. And what I was thinking, I mean, it took me weeks to kind of feel normal after that. Like, what's weird about an incident like that is your survival instincts kick in. And so I didn't really feel afraid or anything like that. I just was like, okay, comply with this person, get them out of the store, and then hopefully talk to the police. But by the time the police came, I just started shaking. Like, my body just had been holding in so much tension that I literally was like getting hit with like involuntary tremors because it was so traumatic. Um, and I will tell you guys, if you've ever had a gun pointed at your head that's a live gun, it's not it's not an experience your body just goes, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's cool." At least for me, it wasn't. It was definitely an experience where I carried that stress with me, for a year or so. Um, Also, my job was so bad that when that was done, my manager asked me to stay and help stock drinks. And I was like, "No, I just got robbed at gunpoint. I'm going home." Like, I'm talking to the police and then I'm going home. And she was like kind of mad that I decided I had to go home after being robbed at gunpoint. That's how wonderful my manager was at that place. But anyhow, the big thing that crossed my mind was the fact that I'd always wanted to do comics, and here I was gonna die as some guy playing in bands for, like, shows that, like, are not really significant or well known, and I would just be an AM/PM employee, and that would be it. That would be my biography. It's like, wow, this guy worked at an AM/PM and attended a junior college and didn't take his classes that seriously, and that was the end of his story. Was like he worked graveyard shifts at an AM/PM, and this guy died doing what he loved, working at an AM/PM. you know? It stuck with me, and this is where I wanted to talk about this story. So, that was my wake up call. That was my wake up call. And after that night, I basically doubled down. I did better in college. I got my college degree. Well, not my degree, I got my associates or whatever. And that allowed me to transfer to a Cal State Long Beach and eventually get my art degree and like my BFA and then further my MFA. That was my wake up call that I could die. Um, because I think when you're younger, at least for me, I never really connected the fact that I could die with my own life. Like, I had family members die. Like, I lost my grandparents when I was really little and stuff like that. But I was still young enough to kind of feel invincible. And so I didn't need to take anything like college or making art or making the art that I wanted to and trying to make it count. I didn't have any reason to take that seriously. Um, but when I had a gun like pointed directly at my head, um, it changed the equation. It changed the equation because it helped me realize that, hey, wait a minute, I'm mortal. I have like very limited time here on this earth. And like, I better get my stuff together because otherwise I'm going to be this like guy who just worked at an AM PM. Anyhow, so what's weird to say now is I'm almost thankful that that happened because I think had that not happened, I might have just stayed playing music, kind of farting around with my life. I know farting around is a really wonderful word. that's that's an official statement of what I was doing with my life. But my point is, I I I needed a wake up call at that point in my life. I needed somebody to actually remind me that I'm mortal and that this time is not like this endless time, and that the decisions that you make in life can lead to really bad outcomes. Like if I had decided to stay at an AM PM, and not worked my butt off to get through school so that I could leave the AM PM, um, I would have been probably just working at an AM PM, and I might have been the guy who just got shot, working graveyard shifts. Because by the way, that was a it didn't happen to me, but almost everyone I worked with had had a moment where they had been robbed. There was a woman that I worked with that would only work day shifts because she had been robbed at a night shift in a similar fashion. And like she had worked there for years. A lot of the people I worked with were like people who had worked for AM PM as a company for like 20 years, and they were like, in similar positions to mine. Um, Anyhow, I brought this up because I think that it's really I've talked about this before, the importance of knowing you're gonna die. And I really believe in it because I think if you're aware of the fact that you are gonna die, like one day you're gonna die, I think that actually frees you up to actually focus on the things that you need to get done before you die. Like, what are the things like today, if you died today, what are the things you would regret? And I'm not talking about like bucket list type things because yeah, I mean a lot of people would be like, "Man, I regret I never traveled the world." But I'm talking about the things that you could possibly actually start working on today, you know, that could be a game changer, for you. That are like the things you're supposed to do. So anyhow, that's that's why I tell that story of the having worked a graveyard shift. Um, and I did that job for years, even after I got robbed. I stayed at that job, and it helped me cover the cost of like junior college, which used to cost money. I think now they have more grants available, which is a really good thing. Because junior college is such a great option for people who want to go to like a bigger institution to specialize in like something like art, but you want to save some money, and you can save like half of the debt you'd end up being in uh, just by like getting those first 2 years worth of general ed and non-focused classes. You can get that all out of the way, done very easily. Anyhow, but I had some great teachers at the time too who helped me out. I was really forthright with my teachers, and I told them like, "Hey, look, I work at an AM PM. Like, I'm super poor. I have to work like these graveyard shifts at an AM PM. And so I'm going to take your class, like, and it's a morning class, but understand for me, it's like a night class. Like, so I'm going to, I might even fall asleep in your classroom, and it's not because you're boring. It's that I'm on this weird schedule doing graveyard shifts. And I had teachers who worked with me. I still, to this day, really admire my political science teacher at the time, who literally did wake me up sometimes if I fell asleep in class, and he was sympathetic to it. He wasn't like judgmental of it. He was just like, yeah, that I want you to succeed. I'm going to help you succeed. And it's thanks to people like that I was able to kind of do art as a career. But also, strangely enough, kind of thanks to the guy who robbed me at gunpoint. Not that I would thank him. It was very traumatic. Um, you know, I've had a lot of very strange, traumatic things happen in my life. That might be traumas that maybe I'm still hanging on to. That might be one. I mean, that was, over 20 years ago. So I doubt that I'm really hanging on too much to like trauma from then. But that did mess me up for like a good year, having had that happen. But in a weird way, I almost need to be thankful to the guy who did that, in the weirdest of ways, because it kind of reminded me I'm mortal, and where I am now could be the place I leave. Where I'm at with this world now could be the place I leave. It could be the thing I leave behind. And do I want that, with my life? I don't know. Anyhow, so that was my fun AM PM story. Let me know what your worst job was. What is your absolute worst job? I'm kind of curious. And what I'm going to do right now is put the trailer for Jacob's apartment on, and I'm going to go ahead and get some water. And I am excited about this page. It's coming along pretty well. So I'm going to save, and then we're going to put on the trailer for Jacob's apartment. It's going to say coming in May. It's already come out. So just so you know, this was a trailer from before May. This book is out, and here's the trailer. Speak clearly, it seems that only in dreams can we be these things we've seen and walk around breathing pain. I don't know the part to play in this heart of mine. There's dissonant things, they split at the seams. All right. We are ready to rock and roll. And I'm just going to add some green tones for these different things. I'm trying to kind of vary the hues of green. That was not a variation. that might be. So yeah, that was my AM PM story. I think other than that, the other worst jobs I ever worked were I used to do concessions. This was all jobs I did to kind of get through college. So I worked concessions at a movie theater, and that is basically working concessions means you're like the guy who's like selling popcorn at the movie theater. You're selling like popcorn and you're dealing with the concession stand at the movie theater, and it was for Cinemark. Um, and that was like I think my very first job. Other than like prior to that, like if I needed to make money, I would usually like just use the lawnmower and kind of go around the neighborhood and offer to mow people's lawns for like $20 or something like that at the time. And I think it was actually maybe even like $15, which was a lot back then, but now it's like that's not a really great thing. Like it's not your best deal. Um, but uh, but I got this job at a movie theater partially because my friend was a projectionist for a different Cinemark, and this new Cinemark was opening up, and he kind of got me like in and got me an interview and all that stuff. So I got interviewed, and then I got this job, and we used to have to wear plastic suspenders that were like checkerboard style suspenders and a plastic bow tie. Um, and then we would work at this like, you know, this movie theater. And so that was one of the coolest jobs in a weird way because it was like you got to see free movies. And so I really enjoyed that job when I was younger, because like you got to see pretty much every free movie you wanted because you didn't have to pay to see movies. You could like when you're off work, you could just go in and like your friends just let you in and you get to watch like as many movies as you want. Um, but why that job was terrible, I used to have to clean bathrooms, like women's restrooms. And I will tell you, I didn't really have like an understanding of how disgusting bathrooms could get. And I thought it was pretty bad when I was cleaning the men's restroom. This was like back then. But then you'd go to the women's restroom and oh my gosh, it's like people would have just exploded, like exploded stuff all over the walls, all over everything. It was like the one of the worst things to have to clean was the women's restroom. And you had to wear like this like hazmat stuff, and like you had these again kind of similar to AM/PM. You know, if you found any sort of disgusting biological items, you had to put like dispose of them in this like toxic waste bin kind of thing that would say like, you know, this contains like human remnants or something like that. And that was a very strange and kind of disgusting, but also kind of fun job, partially because of the free movies. But that job, I remember quitting so that I could go to a show. I my friends had gotten like tickets to This Ain't No Picnic, and it was like a bunch of bands, including Sonic Youth and not Tom Waits. My goodness, the Minutemen, Mike Watt, and like a bunch of other people like Rocket from the Crypt, Sunny Day Real Estate, like a bunch of these bands were playing. And I had requested the time off, and I had this manager who refused the time off. And so rather than deal with it like a normal human being, I just quit my job. So I was there for a couple years and then I quit. And again, this was before the before the time that I worked at like the AM/PM. That was another really bad job I had before working creative. Um there's so many bad jobs that I had before working creative that I can talk about. But I am kind of curious again, like in the chats, like what were your worst jobs? What's the worst job you ever had to work? Maybe you're working the worst job. I don't know. But yeah, I thought it would be a fun topic. Let's see, other bad jobs. I hope this is interesting for you guys. I also like bringing this stuff up because I think quite often there's, I experienced this in art school too. Like when I went to school for art, there were a lot of families, like a lot of kids with like families who just covered everything. Um, there were a lot of people I knew who like their families covered like all of their tuition. Like they were kind of rich kids, you know. They're what Gary would call the fancy whites. um, but it's like I don't know. I think it's very formative that I worked these places. It helped me learn how to do customer service. It helped me learn how to deal with tough clients. Uh, having had to work these jobs, like, really did help me in a weird way. Let's see, what's another one? I used to work at a call center. This was after I had transferred to Cal State Long Beach. I worked at a call center for about a year. Um, for Starwood Hotels, which no longer exist. I think they got bought out by like Marriott or something. But Starwood Hotels had a call center where you would get calls from people who wanted to book hotel rooms for like the Sheraton, the Westin, the St. Regis, and a couple other hotels that Starwood at the time owned. People would call quite often and they wouldn't realize that you weren't the lobby at the place. So every once in a while you'd get these calls from somebody who had arrived and they had booked on like something, like one of the internet sites that like offers discounts, and they wouldn't actually have a reservation. They'd show up really pissed off like, "Man, I made a reservation. Why don't I have a room?" And you weren't allowed to tell them that you weren't in the lobby of the hotel unless they asked. If they asked, like, "Are you here?" You could say, "No, we're a call center in Lancaster," or whatever. But um but you couldn't actually tell them or reveal that. So it was always these really weird conversations where you'd have an irate customer who's mad because um their booking for their hotel didn't happen, and then it turns out that yeah, like it was just like we weren't even at the hotel, but they thought we were the customer service for that hotel. That was a fun job. Like the call center had a mute button, so if you had a really irate customer, you could press mute and then you could talk crap about them to the person sitting next to you taking calls. Um, it also was really nice because they paid commissions for sales on top of what you normally would make, and so I learned a lot about salesmanship from that job. And again, like, these weren't like the skills that I was picking up at these jobs didn't feel like they would have any practical application after the fact, but a lot of these really made me much better equipped to deal with the weird world of illustration. Like having some sales skills is not a bad thing to have. Um, if you're an artist, it's not bad to have like a little bit of salesmanship. But I learned a lot about sales and upselling and stuff like by working that job. But most of the job was pretty nice people kind of asking you to get them a deal at a hotel for like a weekend in a specific area. And then your job was to kind of close the sale. And luckily, the nice thing about that, it was the ultimate call center to work at because you didn't have to make cold calls. The calls came to you, you handled them. Usually, people already called to book, but you could do things like upgrade their room or like get them a specific like package deal, and if you manage to do that, you'd get like a chunk of commission off of the sale. So again, like that was another job I worked. That one usually had some weird hours too, and I remember at the time I needed extra money to get through school, and so I would actually volunteer to kind of do some of the stuff other people didn't want to do. I would take just because I was like, hey, I need the money for like when school gets rocketing up again. So I worked there. Let's see. Just talking about odd, crappy jobs. Jim said, Jim said, my worst job, peep show booth attendant, non union. Worst 28 years of my life. That's hilarious. Um, yeah, so like, let's see here. The worst, another one of my jobs, I used to work for Gottschalks. Like, I worked in shipping and receiving there. And I remember they had like a storage space. Um, so when we'd get like furniture and stuff, and this is something to know when you guys go to like a department store at the mall or something like that, understand like half of the furniture models you're seeing built on the floor, like the ones that are already built, the shipping and receiving department usually has to build those. And the ones that don't get built that aren't a floor model, they get stored in the roof. I thought that was like the weirdest thing in the world that they got stored on the roof. That was just a strange little fact. But there's like a whole rooftop storage system that they had at that department store. So all the other excess, like if somebody asked about a strange piece of furniture they were looking for or something like that, um, quite often we'd have to go check, go up inside the roof of the place. But that was a tough job. We used to have to do a lot of moving of like really heavy furniture. And then the main part of the job that was actually probably one of the hardest things was let's see here. Frank said, "Beyond 2 stories, the graveyard years." Yeah, exactly. Um, so one of the hardest parts of that job was the shipping and receiving one was we had to compress pallets, and so there's these wood like base things that are made for pallets of cardboard. And so what we would have to do is like we'd throw the cardboard into this machine, and then you had to clear the machine with like 2 buttons, and then you press like a little foot pedal, and when you press that, like it would smush all of the cardboard into like a cube, and it would just it was like I don't know, like thousands of pounds worth of pressure just being pressed onto this cardboard. And then once it was pressed fully down, you went through these little holes in the presser with like a metal, uh, basically like a thick metal string. And you would use that thick metal, it's like a metal wire, and you would have to tie it in a specific way so that when the 10,000 pounds of pressure released itself, so that the cardboard would expand but wouldn't cause that piece of wire to like snap. And my supervisor at that job had one eye, and they had a patch over their other eye, and they were saying when they were training me, I don't know if this is true or not, but they said, be sure you tie this wire this specific way, because if you don't, the 10,000 pounds of pressure coming at the release of it will cause it to snap, and you could lose an eye. And they basically said that's how I lost my eye. And I was like, oh my gosh. So I remember working on that, and that being kind of weird. Anyhow, so that's some weird jobs. I don't know if you guys liked that or found that entertaining, but those are some weird jobs that I had to work, you know? I also used to work on the art store on campus. And that was probably the funnest of all of my pre before being able to work in the creative space and being blessed to be able to do that. These are all the kind of weird, odd jobs that I had at the time. So yeah, so that's it. That's basically that's pretty much like my history of weird jobs. I'd love to hear your guys' weird jobs. What were the worst? What were the best? And I also need to kind of think about this guy. I want this to be more of a let's see. I would like this to be more of a cream. All right. We are getting there, you guys. We are getting through this. We can make it through. We can do this giant thing. Does that seem right, or should that just be white? I think that should just be white. So I want it to be kind of like a marble statue. So anyhow, I feel like these jobs that I was talking about working really helped me in the future, because the one thing I can say is, like, wherever I end up working, no matter how stressful it gets, it's never going to be as bad as the graveyard shift at an AM PM. Like, that was pretty rough. So I can be like, all right, I mean, worst case scenario, if I end up having to work some odd job, especially if I'm lucky enough for it to be a creative job, it's not as bad as like heroin needles in the bathroom that I have to clean, you know? That's kind of, I think, the rock bottom that I've been to. And even if I end up back at a rock bottom like that, it's like I've been there. I've survived that. I think that's one thing that's also nice about having had some work history where you work some pretty unpleasant jobs. I think it actually helps you appreciate the career and the job that you end up with. Because again, for me, like, if I can keep a hold of that memory, um, you know, it'll help me appreciate the things that I am fortunate enough to do today. So no matter how bad it gets, it's like I'm not having to put heroin needles in a hazardous waste disposal kit, and I'm not getting robbed at gunpoint at a mini mart, you know. But also, you know, I know I talk about this a lot, but you're gonna die. We're gonna die. We're all gonna die, and that's a good thing to remember too, because what are you gonna leave this place with, right? Like, if today somebody came and, like, you know, you got robbed at gunpoint or something, like, what would your life have left behind? Have you done the things? Have you done the thing you're supposed to do? Um, I think that's a worthwhile question to have. All right, we are doing color on this strange little project here. I think I chose the wrong color here again. I think I may have chosen the wrong color here. Pick a pick this color instead. There we go. Do. I am excited about how this page is coming out, and I don't know why I decided to do jobs as a theme for this live stream. Frank was asking, have you done any Ask Uncle Jimmy segments lately? And he said Uncle Jimmy will be soon. That's good. I've been enjoying those, and I have noticed an absence of those, like, And I think that Frank is dead on about saying, Jim, let's have some more Ask Uncle Jimmy. Uncle Jimmy the Lutz. That's my nickname for Jim. When Jim is doing activities for the mob, his name is Jimmy the Lutz. That's Frank said reckless jobs. I also want to bring that up because I feel like when I went to art school again, like there were a lot of kids who were kind of like, they weren't like super rich, but they seemed rich to me because their families would kind of let them like just sort of do whatever and they'd pay their full tuition. And that just seemed kind of insane to me. But I also think it's important to bring that kind of thing up because like if you're ever at a position where you have to like work a different job, like there's no shame in it. There's no shame in like having to kind of do whatever it takes to kind of get by. Um and honestly, like, I think if you're able to kind of have creative output and make your creative stuff, then you're already succeeding in ways that like I don't think a lot of people um would even understand. Okay, so I'm gonna basically make this somewhat of a sandy sort of equation here. I'm going to deselect this spot and then we're going to get into coloring all those little figures. All those little figures that are on the left-hand corner of this image. I'm coming for you. Watch out, little figures. But first I need to deselect this sand area. It's a sandy area. Frank asked, what do I think of the stereotype that all white people are rich? I don't know if that is a stereotype. I think there's a misunderstanding sometimes, um, where people will talk about white privilege, and then some people will think that that means that they think that all white people are somehow privileged, like beyond, like as if there's no poor white people. It'll be interpreted that way. But I think what the meaning behind that is like, even if I'm poor, I've had privileges in my life because of that other people were they as poor as I was growing up, and they had to add being a minority onto that, they would have to suffer other things. Um, a good case in point would be like I had a really good friend in when I was in high school named Jim, and he was black, and like anytime we drove in his car, we'd get pulled over like by cops. Like, and anytime I would be in anybody else's car, never get pulled over. In his car, we'd get pulled over every time we were driving because we lived in a city with sheriffs, and the sheriffs were racially profiling him. And like the first time it happened, I was just like, "This is insane. There's no reason for that." And then he had to kind of walk me through like, no, 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 like this happens to me all the time. What you're going to do is put your hands on the dash, like out where they can see him. And he kind of walked me through how to get pulled over by cops because it's something that happened to him almost every day. Like living in the area that we live in, he'd just get pulled over all the time. And the first thing they'd say is like, are you in a gang? Um, I didn't have to deal with that. Both him and I were about the same in poverty levels. We weren't rich kids, but that was an experience I didn't have to go through because of the color of my skin, and the color of his skin. Because of that, he had to go through a lot more suffering. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's usually how I interpret when people talk about like privilege or whatever. But yeah, I mean, if somebody literally thinks just because you're white, you grew up really rich, like I feel like that is kind of ridiculous. But I haven't really met a lot of people who are making that claim. Yeah, and Marsh was saying his dad's half black and he gets pulled over pretty often. Yeah, exactly. So that's like a privilege that I have, that's just something that doesn't happen to me but happens to other people. And even if we're at the same economic status, I just don't have to even consider what that's like to be pulled over all the time, you know? Oh, and then Frank mentioned that Fresh Prince episode for sure. All right, so I think Frank, I think what you're meaning is fancy whites. I think that's the term that Gary uses for rich white people. Um, let's see here. All right. So I'm gonna put on the trailer for um I'm gonna put on the trailer for Two Stories, and then I'll be back and we're gonna color all of these characters. All of them folks. All right. Here it is. All right. So I know what this base is going to be. That's good to know. But right now, what I'm going to do is color Arabelle. Arabelle. Marsh was saying, I always wondered what Gary meant by fancy whites. Yeah, he was talking about like a rich neighborhood, that was like near a mall that he used to go to growing up, and how it was kind of like the fancy whites. Oh my gosh. Okay. Hold on a sec. Forgot to deselect the rest of the areas. Okay, cool. So, but Arabelle here. And then Frank said fancy whites are the wealthy white people. Yeah, for sure. But I used to misunderstand that when I was younger. Like I remember when I was first learning theory, um, and this was like in graduate school, I was slightly offended by the kind of like idea of like entitlement that white people just inherently have. And it's partially because I just didn't get what they were claiming. And so I used to like be very defensive about that when I was younger. But as I've gotten older and kind of started to understand that the idea of like white privilege is just like a privilege to not get pulled over arbitrarily on a race-based traffic stop, like that kind of thing, or the privilege as a male of like when I was in college, like if I went to a party, I could like walk home from the party. And the worst thing I was afraid of would be like getting jumped or something like that. But I'm not like at risk of getting raped, like there's things like that that like women just have to deal with just by nature of being a female. Like they have other concerns they have to deal with that I've never had to even consider. And it's that kind of helped me understand the whole idea of like privilege, in the sense that it's not like they're saying like I grew up super privileged. Maybe there are some like wacky people that are way further left than I am that think that, but it's more just like you have these specific privileges that you didn't earn, that just came from like the nature of like the race you were born into. And I do agree with that. I do agree with that assessment, because when I think about it, there's a lot of stuff that I've never had to deal with in my life that other, you know, less fortunate, or other people in my exact economic class have a different starting line just by nature of not being white, which is like, to me, once somebody kind of explained that to me, I was like, okay, I get that. I understand that, you know. But it used to, like I said, when I didn't fully understand the concept, it used to really bug me too. Hopefully that kind of helps. I don't know if that's what you were referring to, Frank, but it's like that to me really unlocked what people mean. Most people mean when they're talking about like white privilege or white or male privilege. It's like there's just concerns that you don't have to have that other people do, in the same exact circumstances. So for them, like the hurdle is just a little bit higher to kind of get over, than it is for like myself. And that's not to say there aren't people who are like of other races or other classes that, that like, it's basically not a claim that like just because I'm white, like there's a bunch of horrible things about me. It's just like acknowledging the reality of the society we live in, you know? Let's see here. What do we have? But I will say I am like definitely a class. I tend I unfairly, like, if I have a problem, it would be that I have a class warrior deep in my soul, because I didn't grow up super wealthy, and so it's like, I remember getting teased for like wearing, pro wings and stuff at school, like, and so I definitely have like a part of me that, dislikes rich people quite a lot, and I've had to like kind of reckon with that recently, um, to just kind of realize that like I'm not being very fair in my assessment there, you know. There we go. Need that belt. Arabelle's belt. Arabelle's belt sounds like the name of a star system. You know how like there's like Orion and like there's different like belts that are in astrology. When I say Arabelle's belt, it doesn't sound like I'm talking about a belt. It sounds like a astrological like grouping of stars or something. When I'm literally just meaning, no, I need to color her belt, her literal belt. Frank was saying, let's have Gary explain what fancy whites are. I think he did. That's the catch. I think he did explain what he meant by fancy whites. I actually think that's a pretty funny term. I'm kind of down with that term. We're almost there, you guys. All right. Now we need to color Elizabeth. You guys, this page is zooming along. We're getting there. Now I feel like I need wood to knock on. But yeah, we're now doing Elizabeth, her hair, and got to pick her skin tone as well. And her lip tone. His lips. Do 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 do. You know what I noticed when Marsh is streaming? He'll go do do do, and I kind of do weird things too when I'm streaming. But I just noticed that where he'll. I don't even. I can't even do the do 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 that Marsh does. But I was noticing that Marsh on one of your latest streams. He'll be like do 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 or do do do. It's something like that. I'd have to. We'll have to talk about it, Marsh, whenever I'm on your stream. Hey, you called Gary, and Gary appeared. Gary, I was explaining the concept of white privilege. I was explaining that, and then Frank was saying like we need to. Oh, why am I doing? That's Elizabeth, not her sister. How dare I? How dare I color her? Anyhow, I was explaining why I changed my tune on. I used to think I used to get really offended by that when I was young and less of a bleeding heart liberal than I am now. But I used to not understand the concept. I just thought it was so weird because I thought people were claiming that, I was somehow wealthy because I was white. I didn't realize they were just talking about, the inherent privileges that are unearned privileges that you get for your race, And I definitely, even though I grew up poor, I did have like certain privileges just by nature of how what color I was born into this world with, which is super unfair. Um, Anyhow, so I went into that. And then there was discussion about what you meant by fancy whites. I think I get it. I think you're talking about just really wealthy white people. But I like the term, Gary. I think you are the first person I've heard use that term, and I love it. It's the best term ever. Let's see here. We are getting there. Elizabeth is done. Now let's get that parasol. Let's color a parasol. Yeah. Yeah. That's a perfect description. I think Gary's description in chat matches exactly. I just spilled some water on my beard. I think Gary's description, he said, Gary said, it's outrageous. I had the courage to stand up and speak out against the fancy whites, and now I'm being branded as such. And he said, you know what a fancy white is. Someone who tells you about their vacation where they went boating off Nantucket in khaki shorts? Totally. The ones that donate to charity to lessen their tax burden. I love that. Frank said, that reminds me of the time I went yachting with Burt Reynolds in the Bahamas. When we were at the side of the Caribbean and our yacht got... Have you ever had that? I kind of like this as a bit. I'm trying to work it out. It'll be like the really rich problems, like the rich guy who's just lost touch of the fact that he's really rich and everyone else in the world isn't. He's like, dude, you know that feeling when your yacht gets grounded near the Bahamas and you have to spend a week or two ungrounding your boat because it's gotten stuck in the in the coral reef. You guys know that feeling? Yeah, so that's how I was feeling yesterday. Just that my yacht is stuck kind of feeling. You know what I'm talking about? They're like, man, you know when you're on your 10th round of tennis with your instructor and you really hit like a just not able to like really play tennis to quite the degree that you're used to. You get thrown off your game because your instructor, hasn't really been helping you out. I think we all know what Gary means by fancy whites. I think Gary's pinning it down. He's explained the fancy whites idea. But I feel like as artists, our job is to kind of stand in contrast against the fancy whites of this world. Feel like you gotta kind of stick it to the fancy whites. That's all I'm gonna say. We're gonna do a quick cheat here. Not really a cheat. I'm just gonna paint these areas here. There we go. We're getting there, you guys. We are getting there. We've got this hand kind of being selected now. Dee Dee said, envy is the all-consuming desire to see everyone as unsuccessful as you are. I agree. You shouldn't have envy. And that's something, like I said, I've had to work on myself because I didn't really grow up very wealthy. And so I have like a little bit of a class warrior in me that without justification will kind of like look down on somebody who grew up really wealthy. And that's not right. There's plenty of people I know in my life who grew up with a lot more than I did, and they're great people. And just because like I don't know, it is a weird bias to kind of like try to clear. But it's a bias I'm aware of. But I agree. I don't think we should be wishing poverty on everyone, you know. Let's see here. Wait a minute. Okay, good. I was making sure I was doing those sleeves correct. Feel like I might have missed a part of it, but I don't think I did. There is one thing I need to fix here, though, and that is here. I do think it's pretty reasonable, though. Like, if you are somebody who grew up like super wealthy, um, not, and I don't think anybody in my audience is really in that group, but if you are somebody who grew up that way, I think it's important to at least acknowledge that you had a little bit of a head start over other people. And that's okay. I mean, that doesn't make you a bad person, but just acknowledging that, reality is, I think, a wise thing to do. Just, because like, let's say our goal in a game is to get like $100 or something, and I start with 0 and you start with like 20. that's not a very fair game. I'm not saying everything should be a fair game. I'm just saying at least acknowledging that you kind of have a different advantage. It's not a bad thing to be aware of, you know. And as a Christian, it's like I don't even think all good things come from like our own doing. I think a lot of it's just like depending on what God has kind of willed in people's lives. And so there's that as well, where it's like, I think being cocky about, whatever blessing you've gotten is like kind of missing the person you need to be thankful to for those, said blessings or whatever. Okay, we got, look at that. Elizabeth, Arabelle, and Henrietta are done. That's good. We're getting there. Now we're gonna do this hat. This specific hat. March was saying you're right. I do. Let's see here. Okay, so Dee Dee said, yeah, everyone has more money than others, are made to feel guilty and a terrible person. I agree with Marsh's comment earlier. Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's like that's the thing. I don't think people should be guilty for being well off. I just also don't think like people should forget, like, for me, it's like I have a decent job now, and I think it's kind of important for me to remember that I have a decent job. That's not like a bad thing. It's not a thing to feel guilty about. It's just like if I'm talking to somebody who I was talking about all the bad jobs I had to work as a teenager and early 20s. Um, and at the top of the stream, and like one of the things I would say is like if I met somebody who's my age and they're working at like AM PM graveyard shifts, like I should really just as somebody who is better off now than I was then, I probably shouldn't go like mouthing off about my wealth or something, because like that's not really fair or really considerate of that person. That's all. But yeah, I don't think you should feel guilty for like getting yourself out of a bad situation. Like that's, I think, for me, it's like weirdly enough, I feel a lot of pride based on like where I've come from and what I've accomplished so far. I feel a lot of like, I think, healthy pride, in that. Um, because for me, like what I've achieved is more than I thought I would. Um, considering what starting grounds I had. And that's the thing too, is like it's not like I grew up super poor, we weren't a wealthy family, but it wasn't like I didn't go hungry. Um so if I'm talking to somebody who did grow hungry, I just need to acknowledge those differences. That's all I'm kind of getting at. But yeah, being like super against, you know, people who've achieved stuff, I'm not really a fan of that either. Let's see here. Okay. Here we go. We're getting there. I think the only kind of like super rich person I would kind of judge would be like somebody who inherited wealth and did nothing with it. Um, and did nothing to contribute to society. Like that to me would be somebody I wouldn't really respect. Um, because I feel like if you're born with like blessings like that, you kind of need to do something to benefit society. Doesn't mean you have to like give away your money or anything. It just means like do something. Like do something to like earn a little bit of significance in this world. Oh my goodness. Okay. I just had my my window. There's a shortcut I hit every once in a while, and sometimes I'll hit it wrong and it like pulls open this whole window. But luckily that's gone. Let's see here. Okay, so we have this. We need our shoes. And we need to do something with the cane here.
Go get Benji.
All right. Let's see here. The cane. What color was the cane? I gotta see. All right, the cane is dark too. That's good to know. Cane should be the same as this. Do. I'm trying to learn Marsh's do thing. I love it. Anyhow, I don't want to steal Marsh's do though. If you guys want to know what I'm talking about with Marsh's do, if you're not already subscribed to Marsh Makes Comics, you guys should be. I'm guessing most of my audience is probably already subscribed to Marsh because, I mean, he's got a hella lot of subscribers. Let's see here. But if you aren't, you guys should be watching that. It's pretty awesome. Okay. Now we need. Did I do his hair correct there? I just found an error, you guys. A very easily resolved error, but nonetheless an error. Let's get this hair color. Oh, boy, did I mess up on that one. Okay. Glad I caught it, though. I have his eye color as his hair color. That's not good. His hair color should be this. Ta-da-da. Easy fix. At least it was an easy fix. That's good. Okay. Now, let's get back to where we were. I like the da as a variation. That's pretty good. I do make weird noises myself, though, all the time during streams. So quite often I'll find myself like, okay, I do need to actually keep in mind that. All right, we got to get this hair color. We're going to finish this panel. Like this whole page is going to get done. How is everybody? What projects are you guys working on? Yeah, for me, I think the last thing I'll say on the whole wealth divide thing is it's just knowing where people come from. So my point being, like, if I were born into a wild, vast inheritance, to just know that I'm not necessarily on the same page as somebody who's not born into a wild inheritance. And I agree with Dee about, like, giving is like a really good way, and a thing that, a lot of us do in this country, and I agree with that. But I guess my point is just acknowledging that, like, people have different backgrounds and people come from different situations. Like, so for me to have gotten my master's degree was a lot harder, I think, than it would have been had I had specific entitlements, like, as I had grown up. Now, I'm not saying I should have those entitlements. I'm just saying, like, acknowledging there's a difference is not a bad thing sometimes, just to, like, get along with people. Um, and if somebody had worse circumstances than I did, for them to get the same degree that I got, like, would be probably just a slight bit harder. Not that I didn't work hard. It's just, I think it's good to acknowledge those differences. That's all. That's my last word on it. Other than that, I am enjoying this page and I want to know what you guys are working on. What are you guys working on as we're chatting? Let's see here. Streams and screams. Marsh was saying I should make weird noises like screaming. Streams and screams could happen. All right, we got some more coming here. I actually found the do thing very charming, Marsh. It's a cool thing. Okay, what do we have? We have his vest, and we have another jacket. A jacket. Okay. Here's his jacket. We are getting some mass progress going here. Marsh says, I have a comic idea I got from Dee Dee's stream today, and I'm going to try and start it tonight and maybe finish it tomorrow on the stream. Nice. Marsh makes comics again. Yes, I love it. I want to see everybody making comics. It's something I get joy out of when folks are making comics. I also somehow deselected these feet all weird. That doesn't make sense. That needs to be corrected. How did I miss those feet? All right, let's see here. Do. We're gonna get through selecting this this coat. But Marsh, I'm excited, man. That'll be cool if you rock some awesomeness there. Was that not the coat color? Oh my gosh, I'm off my game today. That was the pant color. How dare I? Okay, still easily fixable. Still fixable. Okay. I need to just do this. Grab that coat. deselect anywhere else that this color might be used. Pick that. And now we've got the pant color and the shoe color. Whew. And my usually very organized method has gotten a little disorganized because I messed up a couple of my selections, but we're back on board. Chris K said, "Oh, hey, Dee Dee. Them's good looking wardrobe." All right. We got some shoes. How are you doing, Chris? What are you working on, buddy? You working on freelance work? What are you up to? Chris is usually working on fascinating and cool projects, some of which he won't be able to talk about, I'm imagining. But he tends to be working on really cool stuff. Okay, we're going to do some hair now for this dude. Got a bit more of an Oscar Wilde-ish look going. Let's see. Skin tone. And there we go. White for the eyes. Skin tone. Skin tone for hand. Yeah, Chris said on a project, a fun one, but NDA'd. He said, I can say it's kid friendly, so looking forward to seeing it come to life. That's awesome. Very, very cool. Chris Caligula has a really good comic series called The Sunless Circus. And if you look for either Chris Caligula, Kitten Rivet, or Sketchboy07, those are good places to find Chris's stuff. And I really recommend owning The Sunless Circus. It's a really good comic. It's just a lot of fun. It's beautifully illustrated. It's about the first issue is about a robot who daydreams about becoming an accountant. And Chris, if I botched your pitch, you can correct me in the chat. Hopefully I didn't blow your pitch. There we go. Okay. We've got the color for that. And we have this and this. I guess I did the pitch okay. Chris said thanks for the excellent pitch. Here we go. All right, we've got some pants. Yeah, Chris and I go way back, Marsh. Chris and I were in the same graduating class in college, and we both kind of came up together in art. Like, we both started freelancing around the same time. We've been pretty tight since then. But yeah, Chris is good people. I can say that. All right. We have one last kid. You guys, oh my gosh. I'm almost done with this page. I'm so excited. It's not as much of a beast as this last page that I'm getting a lot of colors from. That's but it is kind of a beast to do. So I'm hoping to be done with this. Luckily it wasn't as bad as the last page, but it is taking a while. So we're almost there, guys. I just have to color this kid and then I'm done, which is kind of like thrilling. So, okay, now we're going to do his hair. Oh my gosh. And once I'm done coloring Pen, which is her kid, then we are good to rock and roll. Huh. Just thought it would never happen. Plaiting takes a long time. Okay, and we're going to have just a little bit of white here. Whew. And yeah, Chris was saying it's such an interesting era that I'm working at where nothing was minimalist. Yeah, that's true. It's sort of like a very ornate landscape and era where all the clothes were just insane. Like this Tubi thing that it's kind of a weird, just kind of weird outfit they had this kid wearing, but it was his outfit. Then we have just the last part, which is going to be his outfit. And then the grass, which is already done. Oh my gosh, you guys, we're almost there. We're almost there. I got to be careful not to get so excited that I'm almost done that I make a mistake. That can happen sometimes. Whew. Okay, let's just get that last touch of green. And shading. And we're done, you guys. I finished the page. Woohoo! Sorry, I'm actually kind of yelling that. Yay, I'm done. All right. So that's going to be a nice little set of pages. I want to show this one off real quick too, just so you guys can see it again. That's a rad page, right? I'm pretty proud of that page. Like that's a pretty damn good page of comics. And I feel really good about that page. So anyhow, that's the previous one, and then this is the one we just finished today. Thank you guys for hanging in there with me and hanging out with me while I create art. It's so fun. And now I'm going to get into the next stuff. Streams and screams. You guys got it. And that's basically yeah, Marsh said Victorian minimalism never caught on apparently. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for hanging out with me. I will be back working on other stuff at some point. But I appreciate you guys hanging out with me on the stream. I appreciate the really interesting discussion. There was a lot in the chats that got really interesting where people were talking about their different opinions and stuff regarding like fancy whites. Um, and actually, I just think it's really interesting dialogue and discussion. And again, the thing I like about our community, and I've mentioned this before, I like the fact that we have a group of people who are politically diverse. We're, culturally diverse. We have a really diverse group of people in our little comic clique. And honestly, I love it. I love our community. I love you guys, all of you. And I really appreciate it. And I hope whatever, you guys were doing, that it was something productive and I was able to hopefully keep you guys company as much as you kept me company while I was being creative. And I will see you guys on the next live stream. That'll do it. So have a good one, guys. Oh, and make sure you've hit subscribe, hit the bell. Definitely give this a like if you were in the chats during this. That helps it get viewers later on. And then also make sure you've picked up Jacob's Apartment or Two Stories, my two graphic novels. Okay, bye.